We would like to welcome everybody today to our presentation on implementing an open pedagogy assignment in your courses. In the chat, I have just shared with you a hyperlink to SUNY Fredonia's OER reciprocity. If you'd like to learn more about our assignments, you can find them there. So our goal for you today in attending our presentation or our workshop is for you to get a sense of how you can implement an open access textbook assignment that's written by students for students. So we are going to start by just simply overviewing the assignments that we completed in our courses. And Kelly is going to begin by talking about the assignment's learning objectives.
Hi, everyone. Our assignment's chief learning outcomes included fostering a learner-centric understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion as it relates to course concepts and theories. Additionally, we wanted to help readers become better at communication aspects in their world. And finally, we really encourage student authors to reflect on their identity, representation of self, and if applicable, marginalized narratives. We designed our assessments to support ongoing discussions about how open pedagogy stimulates education's efforts to be more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Angela to discuss the premise of these renewable assessments.
So as you'll see on this page, I'm the one that created the textbook on the left, and then Kelly created the textbook on the right, or I should say our students created these textbooks. And in 2023, we received our open pedagogy assignment. So that's what really initiated this assignment. And we designed the assignment requiring that students write content for an OER textbook. And the goal was to expose readers to concepts that we discussed in our courses, which had related to communication. And this assignment was learner-centric OEP in that the students created their own OER, but we as the instructors oversaw it. And then the social justice principles were also brought into the textbook as well. And then we felt that was really important that they bring in some sociocultural diversity into their chapters. So I'm going to start by overviewing my course. So the class that I did this assignment in was Com 430, which is an upper level communication course. It tends to be taken by second semester seniors, but I will have juniors in there every now and then, and the class is offered in person. So the assessment involves students writing a 750 to 1250 word, I'm going to call it chapter. And in that chapter, we were, and I'll show you an example of this in just a moment. In addition to that, I require that they use at least one open access visual, and it could be anything as long as it had a Creative Commons license or was in the public domain. So a lot of them chose to use photographs that they found on Flickr, for instance. They also then had to apply the course concept to a real life situation. The situation could be one they made up and hypothetical, or it could be one that actually happened to them. And in that instance, it was fun because I had students upload a picture, like for instance, of them and their sibling, and then license that through Creative Commons, which was pretty cool to see them take that extra step. And then I also required 5+ sources for the chapters. Now, again, this is an upper level. A lot of them take this their final semester of college. So it's important to me that they know how to use the library databases. So they had to have 2 journal articles. They could cite the textbook. And I also wanted them to have 2 additional sources. And I encourage them to use OERs as their additional source. So on this slide, you'll see how students signed up for the assignment. On the left is the Google Doc that I created. Students just went into the doc and wrote their names next to the theory that they wanted to discuss. And you'll see each chapter had 1 or 2 students. They did not work together. It was independent work that wrote the chapter. And then on the right, you'll see I created a template for them to use as they were writing their chapter. So I created some text box in a Google Doc. And I copied that template and assigned it to them and they used it. I found students hated these text boxes, so I'm not going to do that again. And instead, I'm just going to have a Google Doc and have them just type in a Google Doc. It'll be a little easier for them. Here you'll see an example of a sample student chapter. So this student was discussing, for instance, social penetration theory, which if you're familiar with communication is often accompanied by a picture of an onion. And that's what the student used. It was a photograph that was licensed through Creative Commons. So I did require that students use a proper attribution here, which even though they had the attribution creator, the website that they used it, they still struggled with that. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then you can see here what the student did was bold key terms. That was important. And then define the terms, applied the term to a real life example. And then one thing I liked that students did was hyperlink then to the sources that they were citing. For instance, this here is an OER. And so then the student hyperlinked to that OER so people could read more if they wanted to. Finally, here you'll see how the content was displayed. So if you go to the Fredonia OER reciprocity website, or if let's just say you stumbled across this on Google, this is how I displayed the student's book. So you'll see I just offer an overview of the assignment and then the license here. And then over here is where you actually see the content. So if somebody would like to read, let's say they want to learn about expectancy violation theory, they would click on this hyperlink and then it would take them to the chapter. So this is how I chose to display the information, at least for now, until we have more, and then maybe I'll put it in Pressbooks or something along those lines. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, and she's going to talk about her health communication class.
Many of the parameters that I used were very similar to Angela's, so I'll discuss kind of the things that were a little bit different. So first of all, as similar to Angela, the health communication course is offered typically their last semester and during the summer semester. And I typically have mostly seniors and a few juniors. What's different about my course is that it's offered asynchronously, fully online. So for this assignment, I had to do things just a little bit differently. First of all, I did keep it individual as well, and submissions were to be between 750 to 1,300 words, which ended up surprisingly being 100 pages. I just didn't do the math right away, and had I realized that, I probably would have done things just a bit differently. I also required an open source visual or YouTube concept to illustrate a theory or concept. I included one hypothetical or real example of a theory, model, or relevant content. And similar to Angela's, I did require 4 sources, and one of those could also be their textbook. Let's talk about how this was organized. So first thing I did was create a YouTube video to verbally tell students what I was looking for in the chapters. That seemed to be kind of the biggest struggle, not so much assigning the assignment, but what am I supposed to write? So first of all, what I did is I created a column based on our current textbook. I created our new textbook column with the chapter names. And then on the right, you'll see students were able to sign up for the chapter they wanted to work on. And then if you look at the very bottom of this Google spreadsheet, you'll see that they would pick the chapter on the bottom, and on the next page, they would pick which theories and concepts out of the chapter that they wanted to discuss. And this worked really smoothly. Finally, let's take a look at what the results were. So on the left, you can see here's an image of the first chapter of our textbook. It was completed in a Google Slides format. I wanted to be able to quickly hyperlink to each student's pages. And you can see this on the Fredonia OER Reciprocity. When you click on the link for this textbook, the first chapter is completed and edited, but as you go, you'll start to notice it's not completely edited, and you'll get an authentic look at our student writing. Let's now switch on over and talk about the challenges, solutions, and future iterations for our textbook. Oh, I think Angela's a little bit frozen there. So first of all, the big challenge that we saw after Angela and I collaborated was student writing. And even with 17 years of experience, there were a few things I had forgotten about that students need assistance with. And one of those was integration of quotes and transitions between concepts within their submission. So some of the solutions that we've devised is scaffolding the assessment, maybe putting them into collaborative writing groups, doing more peer review, and maybe artificial intelligence assistance. Next, let's talk about the student successes and some of our quick future iterations. Two big things that I pulled out for success were that they had fabulous hypothetical examples that demonstrated great application. In the future, I'm hoping to add a multiple choice assessment where they're going to use artificial intelligence to evaluate and change into scenario-based questions for a study guide at the end of each chapter. Angela, what did you find?
So as I mentioned during my presentation, I really liked that students license their own image. I like the idea of them contributing to this OER, open pedagogy, open license environment. One thing that I will do in the future that's not necessarily related to what they wrote, but I will have them submit their chapter to turn it in because I did not do that this time and I should have known better. Later on, I did discover that there were students lifting content from Wikipedia for whatever reason. And so I've had to go through and just take those chapters out and then cite the information. Other thing I would like to do is provide students with a list of key terms. So then that helps narrow their scope. I think some of them were overwhelmed by just the pick any 3 terms. And so by giving them a little more direction, I think that will help them. So what we did a Google form at the end of this assignment because we both felt that there were things that did not go well, but the students didn't necessarily tell us what those were. And what was fun though, was we discovered things like a student who wrote, I really like the concept of this assignment because it feels impactful. It's nice to work on something that could actually benefit people. And so whereas we as the instructors were honing in on what we thought did not go well, it turns out the fact that they were contributing to the OER movement. So now we'd like to turn it over to you and see if you have any questions that you would like to ask us about this assignment.
Participants, feel free to unmute yourself and speak right up. If you're a little more shy, you can write something in the chat.
Has anybody done this type of assignment before? And what was your experience? What were your wins and maybe things that didn't go as well?
If not, one last word of advice too would be, as Angela and I have collaborated, is we just kind of went in and did this. I wouldn't call it on a whim because we planned for months, but I think we do it on a smaller scale to start with, right? Like I think I having 100 pages was shocking to me, and so I think if I do it again. And I will reiterate this textbook, but if I were to start a new project, I would start smaller with maybe just case studies or maybe just starting with the multiple choice questions.
Yeah, and I would only have them do 1 chapter, not 2, and have it be due towards the end of the semester. Once maybe instead of these were due throughout the term, so maybe the product would be better if it was towards the end. And they've also, students have suggested that in the future I provide samples. So I did give them example OER textbooks that they could look at, but I don't know that that was the right way to go about it. So now that I have some samples of student work, I do plan to share those with students in the future so they can see how others approach the assignment. The other big piece of this was editing. This was turned out as the assignment was happening. I was like, oh no, because it was rough. Some of just the writing was rough. Some of the citations were incorrect. So I know when I've talked about this with other instructors, they'll say, well, what about the big elephant in the room? Students writing the content, because you know, some of them do really well and others not so good. And so that was something, the editing that you have to do as the instructor is immense. And like Kelly said, she's only had time to do one. I was able to hire an undergrad who had that was in the class, who also had an English degree. And she edited the chapters over the summer. I was able to use OER incentive funds for that. So the burden wasn't placed on me, and she did a beautiful job, and I'm so grateful for that. Did you want to add anything, Kelly?
No, I think those are some of the really big things. So we would encourage you to, you know, start with 1 or 2 or 3 chapters and maybe have them in groups so that, you know, the editing is less. Absolutely. And, you know, our next groups will be editing some of the basic content we have now.
Well, I want to thank you for a wonderful presentation. I'm going to stop the recording